Our oldest son lives in the United States right now. He's doing his PhD in a branch of logic, which is in itself a branch of philosophy. And frankly, I stopped being able to understand what it was all about years ago. He's very clever. I say this not to boast. He has his mum's genes, thank God, but to explain a little about Canada and the United States of America. My son could have studied for and gained a PhD in many universities in Canada, but if he wanted to be funded to have his tuition paid and to be paid himself with a decent wage, he had to go south. A large, beautiful university, lots of money, education is excellent, there's great support, there's encouragement. This is not to say that Canadian universities aren't wonderful, and certainly not to say that Canada isn't a marvelous country. I choose to live here. I choose to travel on a Canadian passport. I'm a Canadian. I've been offered jobs in the United States and back in my homeland of Britain. And although I continue to write for newspapers in both countries, I live in Canada. It is my home. But on this American Thanksgiving week, I have to declare my anger, really, at anti-Americanism and my gratitude to the United States. I travel there all the time, from Louisiana and Alabama and Michigan and Illinois, and New Mexico, Arizona, Mississippi, Minnesota, pretty much everywhere. But I know the country. I know the good, generous, exciting, enthusiastic, sometimes naive and unworldly, sometimes well-traveled and streetwise, black, white, Christian, Jewish, left, right, wonderful, wondrous people of the United States of America. Now, I want you to have a look at this. I want you to watch and listen, and then I want to comment on it and on you.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
How did you react? Were you moved or were you cynical? Did you smirk, look down? Were you embarrassed? Look, I'm a Brit. I'm a Brit from London. I was raised in cynicism, but I tell you this. The 500,000 Americans who died in the war against Nazi Germany and fascist Japan, they weren't smirking. And the Americans who defended the world against the evils of communism, they weren't smirking. When Pierre Trudeau was partying with Marxist despots who were slaughtering their own people, the Americans weren't smirking. Canada, do not make yourself small by defining your nationhood and personhood by not being American. We are not to be perceived as a mere reflection of another, a vibration from the great symphony that is the United States. We are more than that, so much more than that. Nor are we children of an American parent, and if anything, our lineage is European. As such, churlish resentment demeans all of us. A nasty comment to a metaphorical mum because you know she won't lose her temper. Of course, America has not always acted properly, but would you seriously prefer to live alongside any other superpower, contemporary or historical? The last attempt to invade was in 1812, and the Fenian raids after the US Civil War, more fast and fierce. The Americans can learn much from us, but we can also learn from them. Their glorious obsession with freedom, their noble embrace of God and religion, their grand romance with patriotism. I do not support the current administration in Washington, largely because it has moved counter to American values and virtues, but I still support the country that it governs. America has much to be thankful for this Thanksgiving, and Canada has much to be thankful for precisely because our neighbor is the United States. As for our son working for his doctorate, what could be more practical than a PhD in philosophy? I mean, he can't repair the car or mend the plumbing, but he can explain the logic of why I want and need to do both in Canadian as well as in American. So I'm an optimist, I suppose, about the United States of America, but is that appropriate? I mean, should we be optimistic? Now, John Robson has some opinions about this, and he put this package together for us. Have a look.
If the United States is such a mess these days, why do I keep eating at McDonald's, buying latte with the Starbucks app on my iPhone, and shopping at Walmart? Oh, sure, you watch the American president dithering over Syria or Iran.
I also know that our country will be stronger if we act together.
You see the government shut down over Obamacare, it's easy to get discouraged. Or look at Detroit. Do you know during World War II, by weight of war material, the Ford Motor Company alone outproduced Japan? Now the place is a wasteland, packs of feral dogs roaming the streets, 40% of the streetlights don't work, and the unions say it's unconstitutional to cut their bloated pensions. It sometimes seems as though Americans are whining, overweight, bowling alone, and Googling Miley Cyrus. But let's not get hysterical here. If you do polls, people still say it's the coolest country in the world. I mean, think of Johnny Depp.
It's not only fine, it's acceptable, it's more than acceptable, it's preferable.
And speaking of Johnny Depp, do you know UNESCO said in 2008 that something like 85% of the movies that are shown worldwide originate in Hollywood? These days, movies need an international take to make money, although superhero movies being watched around the world. For the superhero, it's an American invention. Is anybody surprised when the list of Nobel Prize winners come out and once again the Americans are disproportionately represented? And you know, people keep telling us, oh yeah, some other economy is going to overtake them. The CIA, and for that matter, John Kenneth Galbraith, thought the Soviet economy was doing great compared to the Americans, even into the 1980s. That didn't go too well. Then it was Japan. They were going to be the world beaters. They've been in a slump for over 2 decades. Then it was the EU. Yuck, yuck, yuck. Would you trade America's problems for theirs? Recently, Bill Clinton was in China, and people asked him, is your wife going to run for president? You know, the Chinese president could come to America, no one would ask him what his wife's going to do. And Clinton said he didn't know, he'd support her either way, but he said he thought America would have a woman president in his lifetime, and it would be good for America and the world.
Now, of course, as part of our dialogue, the United States raises the importance of human rights and fundamental freedoms, because we believe that all governments do have to answer to citizens' aspirations for dignity and the rule of law.
That's an extraordinary thing to say. Does anybody think if New Zealand has a female prime minister, it's good for the world? But America matters. America is still outsized in all kinds of ways. I mean, sure, now people are telling us China's overtaking them, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, China has passed the United States in manufacturing, if you believe their statistics. But they're devastating their environment. Their populace is growing old without having grown rich. Their demographic structure is inverted. There's no way you'd trade America for China if you knew what you were doing. Yeah, sure, the United States has its problems. Yeah, they better get their act together. But I'll tell you what, they're still the ones to beat in everything from culture to economics. They're about to become the largest producer of energy in the world. They're the largest exporter of petroleum products. And oh yeah, Walmart is the #1 company in the world. Don't count America out.
Yeah, but John, they spell center incorrectly. Didn't you see that last picture? I mean, for goodness sake, what's wrong with the people?
Well, they're prone to enthusiasms like simplified spelling.
Yes, they are.
Americans don't do things by halves.
I thought that was extremely well done and brave of you for being out there in the cold. It's fashionable and very easy to criticize the Americans. And of course, they do get things wrong. But when they get things wrong, we notice because they do fly so clearly, other people are under the radar. You're still an optimist, though, with all of the economic challenges and the current administration. You still think America is exceptional?
Oh, absolutely. I'm still very hopeful. I mean, the saddest thing for me is Britain's proof that a country can be exceptional for so many years. And Britain used to dominate the world culturally, economically, militarily, a tiny, damp, foggy island off the coast of Europe, because its people were free and were proud of their freedom. And in half a century, that all seemed to disappear. Yes, it could happen in America. But I look at Barack Obama as a symptom, not a cause. I think he is not a good president, but he's not like FDR. He's not a driving force behind changing America in ways that make it less free. He is a result of the American electorate making bad choices. And I believe that this fundamental ferment in America, this dynamism that has always been part of the United States from the founding, is still there, and that they will sort themselves out, they will smarten up, that there will be changes in the electoral demographics, that certain groups that now overwhelmingly vote Democrat, particularly blacks, will start to vote Republican, and suddenly you'll discover that the more government is always the answer party is in drastic retreat again.
You know, John, I have to say, I do not share this vision. I spend a lot of time in the States these days, and the idea that the black community will start voting Republican, and even that the Hispanic community can be convinced to vote for a more conservative party, that's possible. Americans right now, conservative Americans, don't share your optimism, you know.
Well, I know, and I sometimes tell them this is a bad way to go because it makes you frown and snarl, and that is not an election-winning strategy. You need to be, suaviter in modo, fortiter in re. Be firm on the need for changes, but be cheerful and optimistic. You got to sound like Ronald Reagan, even when you're thinking like Barry Goldwater. But I am convinced that they can do it. I mean, again, look at the United States in 1968. Talk about a place that was on the rocks. And we're saying, oh, that's it for America. They're totally done now. They're on fire and sinking into the swamp. And then you look at them 20 years later. And again, I think we'll look back in 20 years at America in 2013 and say, yeah, it was another difficult time, but by golly, that you just can't keep Americans down.
I do hope you're right. John Robson, thank you very much indeed.